Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made for Mixed Media Mayhem. For today's layout, we had to use wood, texture paste, and a stencil. I often use stencils and texture paste on my layout, so I was really happy to see that those were two of the ingredients for this week. I started off with some sprays. I was using a piece of paper that I had tried to put a different background on, and I didn't like the way it turned out. I was using some Dilutions ink spray in fresh lime, and it looked really bright when I first put it on the layout, but once it dried, it was too dull. And I didn't include that footage because it was a little bit blurry, but what I decided to do is just wipe it right off the background. This is a piece of heavy white cardstock, and I've covered it with gesso, so I was able to use some water and a paper towel and lift up almost all of the color. There is a little halo of green in the background, but that's okay. I like that. I'm going to be adding more green to the layout, and I didn't want to waste the paper. So I grabbed some other sprays. I am using a Lindy's Starburst spray called Time Travel Teal right now. And then I also add in a little bit of a color called Citron, and that's a Heidi Swapp Color Shine spray. I started off by using the packaging technique to apply the Time Travel Teal to the background. And then I also added a second color of blue that I thought would add a little bit more interest to the background, and that was a Tattered Angel's Glimmer Mist called Robin's Egg. So I thought that the two different colors of blue would make it look a little bit less flat, and now is when I'm adding in that Heidi Swapp Citron color. And I don't add a ton of that, but I wanted to add a little bit of it, and the reason that I'm using these colors is because I'm going to be using a paper collection that has these colors in them. You could see that I'm also adding some splatters of the Citron to the background. And this color green was a lot more vibrant than the Dilutions color. I love Dilution sprays, but it just wasn't the correct color for this particular collection. Now I'm using my paintbrush and I'm adding little areas of the green color, again, just to add a little bit more interest to the background, just so it's not just a blob of blue, although sometimes a blob of blue can look very nice, but I wanted to add a little bit of green to it too. You just saw two photos that I am going to be using. Before I add the photos to the layout, I use some water and I sprinkle it over the background, and then I roll the paper towel on top, and I just love that effect. I don't know any other way to create this water droplet effect. It lifts up some of the color and just creates a cool look that I love, love, love to add to my layouts. Here I'm using my heat tool to dry all those layers of color, and I didn't include all the footage of that, but I just wanted you to get the idea that this is where I dry the layout. And now I'm going in with another layer of that Lindy's Time Travel Teal, just adding a few more dots around the outside. And you could see that there are some areas where you could see the white paper through the background, and I also like the way that looks, again, rather than just having one solid area of color. I also go back in with that Tattered Angel's Glimmer Mist, and I add a few more splatters to the area of color, and once again I dry the background and I lift up a little bit of the extra color with my paper towel. And then I repeat the whole process again with the droplets of water. And this does warp the paper. I know a lot of people are hesitant to use so much color on their background because of warping. What I'll do is, when I have just sprays on the background, no acrylic paint and no modeling paste, I'll run this page in the laminating sleeve through my laminator, but of course without any lamination film, and that will help to flatten it out. Now I'm using some Liquitex gesso. This is the same gesso that I used to coat the whole background with, and I'm just dabbing the gesso on in a few areas where I wanted to fade out a little bit of the color. If you want to just fade certain areas, you can put on one coat of gesso. I find that though, if I really want to get rid of a certain area of color, I have to put on more than one coat. And I use a very, very old paintbrush. All of my mixed media brushes are fairly good quality, older brushes, bristle brushes, and I use them constantly. When I want to paint an image, then I'll break out my better quality, newer brushes. But for this kind of work, I just use whatever brushes I have. So now I'm adding some stamping to the background, and I use a couple of different background stamps that I have in my stash. I started out with a mesh stamp that I'm sorry, I don't know the manufacturer of, but I see a lot of mesh stamps out there, and I think they're a great staple, in my opinion, for backgrounds. And now I have this stamp that has little circles and stars in them, but it's just the outline of the circle and the star. This is the first time I've used this stamp. I'm afraid I don't recall where I got it from, but I thought this would be great because this is going to be a birthday layout, and I think of stars and confetti when I think of birthdays, and I thought that this kind of looked like confetti. So I'm using this stamp mainly around the outside where the color meets the white paper, but I'm stamping all around this area of color as well. And I was very happy with the way this looked on this background. And I'm using Stays On ink in jet black. And the reason that I use Stays On ink is in case I want to add more water to the layout. It won't run, it's a permanent ink. Now it's time to add some stencil work to the background. It's not super visible because I use darker colors, but I do really like the addition of texture. I'm using some Liquitex modeling paste. I'm using an Echo Park stencil. It's called Birthday Sprinkles. And I'm using a metal palette knife. Sometimes I just use those cheap ones from a Dollar Tree, but I bought a set of metal palette knives while back, and I found that I really like these. I like the way there's a little flexibility to the metal, so I've been using those more often than those plastic ones lately. And I'm just spreading the texture paste all around this area of color, and as I had mentioned before, I have already run the entire layout through the laminator, so it looks a little flatter than it did before. To me, the most important part about using a stencil is making sure that you don't mess up the areas that you already stenciled with the stencil when you apply more modeling paste. So I try to be careful of that. Sometimes I'll use my heat tool and I'll dry the areas that I've already done before I put more modeling paste down. Now I am all done with the modeling paste and I'm adding some white splatters. This is watered down white acrylic paint. I love the way white splatters look. I like adding a little bit of white back into this big area of color because there's a lot of color going on. And then I just add a few touches of black splatters. I don't want to have a lot of them, but I thought that just a couple of black splatters would look nice on this background. The background is finally complete, and now I'm going to add some wood to the background. I wanted to add some wood stars, so I picked out stars in a number of different sizes, and I'm going to use 3 different colors for the stars. In the background, I used blue and green, and so for the stars, I thought I would use yellow, orange, and red, and have kind of a different color scheme going on for the stars. For the stars, I used some Waverly Acrylic Paints. I used the colors Sunshine, Persimmon, and Tangerine. And I didn't show this in the video, but I put on 2 coats of the acrylic paint just to make sure that the entire wood star was covered. I'm using 2 photos for this layout. I'm using photos that measure 3 inches across and they're 4.5 inches high. I have them matted on some white cardstock and then again on some pattern paper. One of the pattern papers is orange, one is yellow, and all of these papers are from the Simple Stories Let's Party collection. I wanted to pop the photo that's on the left up on some foam, so I reinforced it with some heavy cardstock, and then I put the fun foam on the back of it, and then I used some ATG adhesive. This just holds the foam to the layout temporarily, but I tend to move my photos around and my other elements around, so I don't like to permanently adhere things like photos down or anything right away until I'm absolutely sure that's where I want to put it. Otherwise, sometimes I could get frustrated. So that's what works for me, but if you are better at making decisions than I am, then of course you could use liquid glue from the beginning. I'm using the same Simple Stories collection to add embellishments to the layout. I have some chipboard pieces that I picked out. There's the banner underneath the two photos that says party. That's going to be my title. I have a cake off to the right, and I'm adding some candles to the left. I took the backing off of some of the chipboard pieces to attach them down. The banner that's at the top of the two photos, when I took the backing off, I accidentally ripped a layer of the chipboard off. And I hate when I do that because then it's really hard to use ATG adhesive to attach down chipboard pieces unless they have that white backing. But I made it work. Later on, I did use some liquid glue on that. Well, actually on most of the embellishments, but on the banner that's going across the top, I used some liquid glue a little bit sooner because it really wasn't staying attached down to the layout. I love these little curly Q confetti pieces. They had a couple of those in the chipboard sheet. I just love that shape, especially for birthday layouts. So I picked out a couple of those. And then I spread the stars around the layout. I tried to spread out the larger stars. I have 2 on the top and 1 on the bottom, and then I fill in with the smaller stars as well. And those smaller stars definitely move around the page quite a bit. I was thinking about the different colors and the different sizes and trying to spread them out throughout the layout as much as possible. I didn't want too many of the same size or the same color in the same area. I'm going to use a medium-sized star on both sides of the banner that says party. They're not quite in place at this point, but I'm going to glue them down in a moment. And I thought that would help to kind of anchor that title to the layout. And for wood pieces, the gel glue works just fine. I love gel glue because it dries clear and it's fairly inexpensive. So I use that whenever I can. Wood to paper is fine, paper to paper is fine. But for some other embellishments, I use other adhesives. Sometimes I use glossy accents. Sometimes I use gel medium. But for this layout, gel glue and ATG adhesive were all that I needed. These photos are of my younger daughter, Julia. Julia never liked birthday cake. She would always request to have a pie, usually a cherry pie for her birthday. And I had these photos. They're not like the best photos in the world, but I really wanted to document and remember that from a very young age, she was not interested in birthday cake. She really wanted birthday pies. I usually would make one for her, but on this occasion, she has just a small one from the local grocery store. They make some pretty good pies. So now I wanted to add some jewels to the centers of the stars. I do recommend waiting until the glue dries on the stars. It makes it much easier to add jewels. I found that since I didn't wait, sometimes I was moving the star around slightly as I was adding the jewel, but it worked out just fine. I used 3 different sizes of jewels. I had a larger size and a really, really tiny size as well. So I used a lot of those really small jewels in the background just to add a little bit of shine to the background. Now, one of my favorite things to do is add photo corners to my layouts. I love the way they add a finishing touch to the layout, and I also like to be able to bring some different colors close to the photos. For this layout, since it's a birthday layout, I wanted it to be whimsical, so I have 4 different colors. I used an EK Success photo corner punch, and I punched out some colors. I decided on green, blue, orange, and red, and I punched those out from the 6x6 inch pad. I use ATG adhesive to attach the photo corners down to the layout. I don't want to use wet adhesive when I'm putting photo corners on top of the photos. I'm afraid that I'll make a mess. I didn't want to overdo it with the embellishments, but I really felt like putting some enamel dots between the banners at the top of the 2 photos. So I picked out a whole bunch of really, really tiny enamel dots, all the different colors that are in this paper collection, and I added a few enamel dots to that banner, and I do like the way it looked. I also added some white enamel dots to the photo corners. I thought there were enough different colors on the layout, and so I thought white would be best. And then after filming, I added a little bird to the layout. You'll see that at the very end. We call my daughter a little birdie, so I thought that was cute that there was a birthday bird with a hat on top of its head. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. I really hope that you enjoyed watching it. Please take a look in the description box. There are links to the channels of all the other scrapbookers who create layouts for Mixed Media Mayhem. They are super talented people, and I am so happy to be a part of this hop. I hope that you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much once again for watching, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.